but very important kind of what we're getting into now. And so as Dr. Robinson spoke with me earlier, I think today's main focus, we're going to be able to hear from our external auditor, kind of go through their presentation. I know some of you on the council just heard this, but it's good for us to all do it together as the audit committee. And definitely we can ask questions and discuss. And then the plan is for, in the December meeting, to really kind of put some things in action. So as you're going through today, make notes, and then we'll need to get with Chairwoman Robinson to get those items specifically on next month's agenda. So we definitely kind of talk through stuff today, but I don't think we're going to be taking any action or forming our suggestions to council just yet. So, well, with that, let's move forward. Invitation for public comment. Anybody? Yes, sir.
I guess with what happened in the meeting prior to this one, I feel a little bad about this, but not bad enough that I'm not going to say it. So I started going to these meetings about 2.5 years ago just to see what was going on, to kind of get the flow of information. Try not to speak too often, but today I think I need to. So I'm just concerned with the audit and the way it was presented. If you start on page 1 with the mayor of the city council, it lists Johnny Dodd as the secretary, or as the vice mayor. He should be the treasurer. Ross, you're listed as being the treasurer, and I don't think your term was up at the end of July or June.
Yes, sir.
Russ McCoyley should be the vice mayor. I got this information from the minutes of the July 6th, 23 council meeting. And then I looked at the 7/24 meeting to follow up to see if I was thinking maybe they got these from the current, the old current, I guess. They're not the same. The other thing that's probably more concerning is on March 7th of 23, there was ordinance changes that eliminated the budget and audit committee and split it into the budget committee and the audit committee. And I think it's imperative that the audit committee be shown on here, because it could be arguably argued that they have a much higher standing in terms of committees than any other committee. They're the only committee on the org chart. They're the only committee on the org chart that has a city employee reporting directly to them. So I think that highlights this body's importance to the city, and in fact puts them in between the employees and the council. Then if you dig a little deeper and look at the ordinances that created the committee and the bylaws, they were first elected in 23, and there have been no elections since then. So for the last 2 years, the chairs have been serving for a 3-year period, which is provided for, but that's in the spirit of the way it was written, I think, was an exception in that they can continue on until they are replaced. But I think if you want to follow what the intent was, you need to have elections annually for those positions. And then there's no mention of a co-chair. So I don't know if it's legal to do what you're doing now or not, but it would be more accommodating if you had a co-chair. Then it would be understood that they would take over after, if the chair could not be here. On another issue, on page 29 of the audit, it gives addresses for the, I can always butcher this, what's the units, what I'd call subsidiaries, but the component units. It gives addresses if you want copies of financial statements. I spoke with Travis at JTA. the address is the wrong address, and I asked him to forward that on to Nathan to get them the right address for that. I guess all this is to say that, if there are these kinds of errors in the reports, then what about the other things? I spent most of yesterday afternoon researching it, and in looking at the findings, I didn't quite get all those. I wanted to give that information to the audit committee. I'm not trying to badmouth anybody. I just think we can do better, and that applies to me and the audit committee and the employees and the council.
Sure. Okay. No, thank you for that, and we'll definitely take those items into consideration as we're working through this, and definitely need to make some of those corrections. Any other comments from the public? Okay. We'll move on. Reviewing of last month's minutes. Any questions on those or any corrections? Okay, if not, can I get a motion to accept last month's minutes?
I'll move.
All right.
Second.
All right. All in favor? All right. Moving on to the report. Ms. Chrissy usually gives us this, and she sent it to me. Let's see here. And this is the report that is given to council each month. So just in recapping, and this was our special call meeting. And so we, under new business, we heard from Mr. Reed talking about the update with the audit. Obviously that's here now, and we're here now, so nothing too in-depth there. And then the other item that we discussed quite a bit was with our HR department and Ms. Merriweather, and as we continue to try to figure out a path with the ethics committee, we heard from them and kind of working through all that to ensure that that's in place and operating as it should. Next steps, we're going to continue to work on that, and then as we discussed today, we're hearing the presentation on the audit, and then our December meeting is where we will put in place suggestions. Again, remember this body is we make suggestions to the council, but we do have an important role that we're overseeing the audit process, both externally and internally, working with our internal auditor, working with our recorder to make sure everything is tidied up and making sure that we're correcting any findings going forward. We'll also be working on a audit calendar, which is important. So like I mentioned earlier, just as we go through today's meeting, please take some notes, and we'll send those to Dr. Robinson to get on next month's agenda. All right. Moving on from there to our presentation of our audit findings with Mr. Reed and Mr. Metz.
Welcome, Mr. James Bentz from Audit and Jenkins. James, are you our audit partner? Is that the yes? About the third week I was here, I got to meet with James and his compatriot Brandon, and they have been a pleasure to work with. And they also understood some of the quagmire that we have had to deal with as we've transitioned into these things. They were pleasurable to work with. The experience was not a pleasure. How does that sound? Anyway, I'm so glad James could be here today. I'll be glad to answer any questions, but I think James has got somewhat of a presentation to give you, and so I can turn that over to him.
Great. Thank you. Well, good morning, everyone. As he mentioned, my name is James Bentz. I am an engagement partner with Mullen & Jenkins, and I have been your engagement partner and was your engagement partner for the June 30, 2024 audit. I've got a presentation here that has a little more detail. Certainly for some of the council members, you kind of heard the high-level version of this. Typically, the way these audit presentations work when you have an audit committee, generally or historically, we have met with the audit committee first and then the council second. I think because of just timing of trying to meet with everyone today, it was a little bit backwards, but Either way, we'll go through a little more detail than we do in the council meeting, just because as your structure, you're in charge and the audit reports back to you all. So I've got my presentation, which is up on the screen, and I think everyone has a copy in front of them. I'm not going to read every page to you. It's certainly available for your information. If there is anything that pops up that you'd like to discuss, please feel free to interrupt. And I do have the obligatory question slide at the end if you want to wait till the end as well. But just to kind of give you a little information about our firm, I know we meet with you all once a year in the presentations, but Malden & Jenkins is a large regional firm. Your audit is conducted out of our Chattanooga office, but all of our offices work together and share resources when the need is there to ensure client service. It just happens that your team was out of our Chattanooga office. We didn't need to pull resources from other offices, ultimately what I'm saying there. All of our engagements have two partner involvement. We have the engagement partner who's responsible, and then we have the quality control partner who reviews the reports to ensure there's never any bias or that, essentially that we've crossed all the T's and dotted the I's. We try to rotate that person every year. Sometimes it may be the same person back to back, just if the need's there and the resources available. This year, Trey Scott served that role for us, and he's another governmental partner. And so you can see on this slide, we have 25 partners and directors, and it's about 16 partners in that number who serve local governments year round. And so we have a full dedicated team to serving local governments, whether it's cities, counties, school districts, or special purpose entities. And I say that to emphasize that our firm working with local governments is a very important piece, and it's not a thing we do kind of around another busy season. It is what we do year round. And as I like to say, I don't do any tax work, and I'm not your guy if you need tax work. Page 3 is kind of the high level results, and this is certainly what we just covered in the other room in there. As your external auditor, we are independent of your management team. We are independent of the financial statements. Our objective in an audit is to issue an opinion as to whether or not the financial statements are materially correct as presented. And what that means is we use risk assessment and sampling in order to test to give material assurance that the financial statements are correct and not absolute assurance. We don't look at every transaction or every process. That's not what auditing standards require, and that's certainly not what the contract is set to do. In issuing an unmodified opinion, it does include your component units. And so there are components of your financial statements that are not accounted for and managed through your internal management team. And we give an opinion on those, but it relies on the opinion that their separately contracted auditors issue. And so for Jackson Energy or Jackson Community Redevelopment Agency, they contract with their own firm to do their audit. They issue an opinion, and we can't issue your report with a clean opinion until we get their clean opinions. And so in this instance, both of them did receive it, so our opinion reflects that as well. On page 4, as I mentioned in there, and just as a refresher, anytime a local government has a federal awards expended in excess of $750,000, you are required to have a single audit, which is a compliance and control test on the high-risk programs that you expended during the year. There's a very defined checklist on how you identify which programs have to be audited. And for your $5.5 million of expenditure, the vast majority of that was with the coronavirus state fiscal recovery funds, which is one of the buckets that fell out of the ARPA program. And we tested that program and issued an unmodified opinion on that program. But we did have a couple of findings related to that we'll get into kind of as we go through this slide. I'll skip page 5. On page 6, kind of just a couple of things to point out here. Though we did have several audit adjustments through this process, and we'll get into those details later. Just as a refresher, we are the external auditors. We had questions, made recommendations, and ultimately management agreed with all the proposed entries we proposed, and those will be reflected in your accounting system and are included in your financial statements for June 30, 2024. I will go to page 8. And a couple of items on here, just some high level. We tend to try to look at a few high level items for discussion purposes related to the financials. And one of the items that unfortunately we're seeing at a lot of governments kind of following the pandemic of all the influx of the government stimulus money is you can see we've kind of got a downward trend in the slide. The graph works a little bit backwards, but you've got a downward trend in the fund balance for the city. And so you can see our fund balance from 21, when a lot of governments kind of got an influx of COVID money and ARPA money to help pay for projects. We've started spinning that fund balance down, and at the end of 24, our unassigned, which is the yellow box here, portion of fund balance is about 23% of our annual expenditures for the year. Now, one of the comments you'll see we talk about later in the slides is the city does have a fund balance policy where the plan is to maintain a 25% fund balance minimum reserve, and we have dipped below that in 24, and when you look at the budgets for 25, we'll be below that again for 25. Typically, when you get below that minimum fund balance policy, your internal policies should require you to put a plan in place so that you can bring your fund balance back up to that policy level. Obviously, we've not audited 25 at this point, but just for the sake of discussion, you can kind of see the trend. And when you look at the fund balance that was in your 25 budget, you can project it's going to end at about 19 million at the end of 25 based on budget. And that has nothing to do with actions. And so one of the things as the audit committee is certainly making sure to kind of communicate those facts to council and to the budget committee, which is no longer a part of the audit committee. On page 9, one of the items in here that we're trying to do is we've got your original, your amendments, your final, and then the actual represents what's in the financial statements. And so you can see, as we talked about in there, this year we've had over expenditures this year. We had about $3 million over expended from what the budget was adopted at. Some of that is covered with the fact that we had revenues come in greater than anticipated. But ultimately, we are spending about $3 million more than what was brought in. And so our expenditures are exceeding revenues, which is reflected in the previous page where we saw fund balances gone down. Page 10 is kind of just a highlight at a very broad bucket level of your general fund, just some of your main revenue streams to kind of help put some pictures, maybe some graphs to the revenue streams we've had over the past couple of years. And the bottom bucket here on the right in the verbiage that we like to see is sales taxes continue to increase and been a good influx for the city. And we've relied heavily on those sales tax dollars coming in, which a lot of governments who are in areas that have a good economic situation have relied on those dollars. Obviously, those are things you can't control in your budget process, so you can hope sales tax continue at certain thresholds, but it's not a revenue stream that the council can really dictate and drive how that looks each year. The blue line is the one that is really within the council's control purview, and you can see our property tax revenues has pretty well stayed neutral for the past 4 years. We did have some assessment increases over the past couple of years. From 2020 to 2024, assessed values have actually increased about 30%. But through that, we've done some millage rate rollbacks to kind of maintain that number being neutral. And so we've rolled back the millage rate almost to the point of, as you can see, we're pretty well revenue neutral. And so that's intentional. We've done that. But that's one that I always like to point out when we look at the property tax. Obviously, that's a sensitive item. That's certainly the hot topic on budget lines. But that's the revenue stream of all of these that the council and budget committee has the control over.
Let me stop you 1 minute.
Yes.
The graph there on property taxes, 24.8 million, am I looking at that right?
Yes, sir.
And the black, okay, now where is that? You show that it's
That's your local sales tax dollars.
27.1% over increase over however period of time.
The property tax is about 27% of your revenue.
I got it.
Yeah.
Thank you. I got it.
Yes.
It's important to note these are general fund revenues as well.
Yes. And so the next several pages, as I mentioned earlier and as we talked in the last meeting, we had several audit adjustments this year. And when we are given the trial balances and the,
I hate to go back, can you provide us with a total tax chart, just like you've got this state, local sales of property, the screen we just left? Not, I know you can't do it right this second, but could you provide?
just a total tax revenue?
Right, see the trend of that.
Yes, sir.